Hello to all our fine listeners out there. Welcome back for another episode of the HyperBaby Podcast. Today we are fortunate enough to have collaborator and multi-talented musician Chad Canfield on our show with us. When it comes to music, Chad does it all. Musician, composer, performer, and overall entertainer. Hey Chad, how's it going?
What's up? That's a great setup there.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
I spent weeks on it.
We didn't
right.
want to oversell anything, but I think we got it just about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
You gotta feed the ego every now and then.
That's right. Otherwise, you won't come back.
Right. Exactly.
No, I would like Chris to talk first about how you guys met, because honestly, I love the story of how you started to work together. I think it's kind of cool.
You want to take that one, Chad, or should I?
Well, why don't you tell your part up until, and then I'll tell my part, and then it'll combine.
Okay, that's a good idea. So I had this keyboard, an electric Yamaha keyboard, gifted to me a long time ago, back in high school, and it'd been sitting around, and I hadn't been using it. And one day I got an upgrade, so it basically was irrelevant, and I didn't need it anymore. So I decided, this thing was gifted to me, so I should probably pass it on and give it away. Someone else out there can use it more than I could. So one day I put it up on Craigslist, and or was it Facebook Marketplace? I don't remember. And I sent it out into the void, and lo and behold, Chad pinged me and said, "Hey, I'd be interested in using that." And I had no idea how serious he was. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. What was your angle of it?
So yeah, it was Marketplace, and I'm starting up this little project where I'm doing some electronic manipulation. We'll just put it that way for now. And I saw this Yamaha keyboard, SY22, which is super classic little synth from the 90s. And I was like, man, that would fit perfectly in this world. So I look it up, and it was, like an hour and a half away from my house. But it was free. So I'm like, whatever, I can go for a little road trip. So I hit up Chris and I say, hey man, I'm interested in this thing. Let's meet up. So we ended up meeting up outside of a Subway, like an hour and a half away from my house. And he seemed really cool. And he had the keyboard. He handed it over with the power supply and everything. And I told him, I said, well, my grandpa always told me that nothing in life is free. So here's a CD of my band Vardo. And I gave him this CD. I think he was really grateful for it, and we were both on our way. Well, about a half hour later, I get a message like, holy crap, this is awesome. This reminds me of this and that and this, and have you heard this band? And it turned out that we were both really big fans of Mike Patton and company, and we started talking a little bit more, and
yeah, I think it was
pretty
cool
much how it happened.
Yeah, I think it was cool, man. Like, some people say they're musicians and say, yeah, this is really cool, check out my CD, and I kind of took that with a grain of salt, because I was like,
Sure.
Oh yeah, this guy's, he's amateur hour and blah blah blah. But after a couple listens of Vardo, I was like, yeah, I think he's the real deal, man.
Right.
It was really cool because we kind of hit it off immediately with all the patent projects and all that stuff. So it was kismet.
Absolutely. And we, it turns out we have a lot of similarities and things in common and interests, and it turns out we work pretty well together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to ask, because there is definitely some back and forth between Chris and I. Who was the first one to suggest doing music for StoneRow?
Chris messaged me. He said, hey, we're doing this card game, because it didn't come up at all, I don't think, until then. He said, hey, we're doing this card game, and it's a medieval themed, and we're thinking about doing a soundtrack for it, and we'd like to see, what you could come up with. And, I do a lot of film music and television and video games and, write for my various bands and some other bands. I'd never made music for a card game. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. I'm working with a couple people about doing like music for books to listen to while you read. And I've done music for conventions and stuff to create an ambiance for an environment, immersion experience. But to do that idea with this immersion for a game was a really cool idea. So yeah, Chris was the one that reached out to me.
It's cool. Yeah, actually, I have to say that is one of my favorite lines when I'm explaining the game to people and I tell them that we have a soundtrack. And everyone kind of looks at me like, why does your card game have a soundtrack? The look on
their faces.
Right. But my answer is always, the question you should be asking yourself is, why don't all card games have a soundtrack?
Right. And you think, you guys are doing this D&D thing, which is really cool. I've been listening to the podcast, obviously. And, there's, people have playlists for their D&D games. And I'm waiting for the day that there's like, like I enjoy that kind of world and that lore. But by the time I was old enough to get into D&D, I was already writing music and playing in bands, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to do that. But I love, the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And I've always been really fascinated with fantasy and, the Legend of Zelda. And so I love that idea for having the soundtrack for play and waiting for that day that there's like soundboards with effects and stuff like that too.
And one thing that I noticed, we got to see how you created the soundtrack, and what really hit me was how much of a backstory you kind of built on your own, and how much of a backstory that you wanted to know about our game. In our game, for those who don't know, we have 4 different suits, which we call guilds, and Chad created the soundtrack for each of the guilds. And if I remember correctly, Chad basically, came up with some backstory for each of the, like an ideal, where the people in the guild came from, kind of like what things they liked and didn't like, maybe the topography where they came from. And that kind of helped source some of that music, which is really cool to see. And I think that lends itself to what you were just talking about as far as like building an ambiance. When you're playing the game, you play the music, it adds an extra layer of, emotion and feeling to it.
Yeah. So I've always been an imaginative writer, and especially when it comes to instrumental music, because there's no lyrics to guide you, to tell you what to think, to tell you what to feel. So when I'm creating these instrumental pieces, whether it be for Vardo or Toma or whatnot, I still like think in lines as like a film composer, I guess. Some of my earliest influences were, film music and symphonies and operas. So there's always a story. And also, so my uncle was a tiger trainer for Ringling Brothers Circus. And I grew up going to the circus every time he came around. So when I started creating music and doing live performance, just standing there behind my guitar just seemed kind of boring. Where's the fire? Where's the crazy clowns? Where's the tightrope? All this, so I started incorporating a little bit more in my live performances. And then when I moved into doing film scoring, the story's right there in front of you. So it's easy to create that world based around this parallel story that is happening throughout the film. And so when I started on the game, I said, yeah, okay, like just give me a little something with each guild. And I think I brought up the idea of doing a song for each guild.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think it was just going to be that Tower of Dreams.
Yeah, we just
sure.
It was just the one, but then you had brought up that idea of each of the guilds, and
right, and kind of creating a voice for each of them. So yeah, I remember saying, well, like, give me a little something about the guilds, and you just basically told me, like, okay, they're this type of people, and they come from this part of the world, this kind of part of the world, anyway, not any particular country, but like regional, I suppose. So yeah, I just kind of created my own little stories. We should go back and read them because they were pretty funny and cute. But yeah, where it's like, music can speak. It's a language. So being able to tell a little bit of a story without words is something that I really enjoy doing and take pride that I can pull it off half the time. And then so anyway, like a little bit about like how we started working together is I do this with all of my clients, is I send little tiny things because it's really easy for me to dive into something and fall in love with a piece of music. And I've learned over the years now how not to get my heart broken when something is rejected.
That's one of our later questions, actually, for you.
Yeah. So
it's gonna be difficult.
Yeah. So I always send like brief little idea, like, do you want me to expand on this? Because I'm not going to spend another like 4 hours developing this like orchestra and then be like, well, that was like awesome, but it's not what we want, kind of thing. So I started just like, I'd grab my iPhone and I would record a little snippet and just shoot a little demo, something super simple. Be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I don't think anything was turned down. I think there was the only thing like was when I recorded the Kaval, the Hungarian Romanian flute. You guys like, what's that like noise? It sounds like grunting or something. I'm like, oh yeah, you're supposed to hum when you play it. It's kind of part of the instrument. It gives it that overtone thing. They're like, yeah, I don't know if I dig that. And I'm like, well, give it a chance, because once everything else is there, you're not even gonna like hear that humming.
Just for you people at home, if it's in the room and it looks halfway like a music instrument, Chad will make it a music instrument. He's well versed in many different items, so I've learned a lot of different types of musical devices since I've got to know you.
Yeah, I do remember that interesting instrument, because we got the demo of it and we're like, am I hearing this right? Like it,
right.
But it was cool once it got layered in. Like you said, you've got these little snippets, these little demos, but then once you layer it with all the different pieces, it has this overall tone that changes quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we really did appreciate you involving us in the creation process.
Yeah. That was something I wanted to bring up too. That's one of my favorite memories of all time.
Absolutely.
It was really cool. We all gathered together in the theater down by the library and did some Foley effects, and you kind of taught us a little bit about how to do that sort of stuff, and we're clapping and stomping and haying, and that was a good time.
Yeah, just seeing, it's always fun working with my clients like a little more personally, but it's a rare occasion that you get them to, quote unquote, like sing or perform on the record. That's a pretty rare thing.
We're always
so it was really fun working with you two, especially, but my favorite part was the girls when they were like trying to keep up clapping, like just how much fun everybody was having, because it's really fast clapping, and we're all just laughing and having fun, and like we're like, oh, we didn't get it, and I'm like, don't worry, I'll make it work, like it's fine.
Like, they're used to us
supposed to be crazy.
Yeah, I think we've gotten a little used to us putting them in kind of strange and uncomfortable situations, and sometimes they have a good time, sometimes they don't. But yeah, that was one of those. We had a good time doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, here, meet this weird bearded guy,
Who's this
and listen to what he says.
Right, because they hadn't met you at all. That was the first time they met you. You were instructing them on clapping and stomping and,
Yeah, and it seems silly. I even mentioned that. I'm like, I know it sounds silly, like teaching you how to clap, but you're going to get really tired really quick if you don't do it this exact way. And just trust me, So it worked out really well.
And there's a sense of that increased involvement and ownership just a little bit by saying, hey, I can hear myself in there. You know, that's really cool.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
So,
and another thing is we created a dance.
We did.
We created a dance for that.
That's a good segue
too. So there's a dance.
Yep, that's a good segue. Why did we create the dance? For a certain event, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, actually. So well, do you guys want to kind of, or whatever?
Sure.
Yeah, we basically, there's this thing called TeslaCon, for people who don't know. It is a gathering of steampunk enthusiasts every year.
Convention in Madison.
Yep, it's a convention in Madison, and Chad has been deeply involved as the primary musician since its inception. Or
no, it's been 10 years running. I started working with them in 2015, so 5 years.
So 5 years. So last year was our first year there. We came and ran a booth, and Chad actually performed several of our songs live at the event. And that was talk about an amazing feeling from our point of view, is just seeing that kind of exposure and hearing those songs that were associated with our game played live in front of that many people.
Yeah, and that was one of my other favorite memories of all time, is when we started playing that. And now, mind you, when I'm playing Haboob, the song for the Blood Moon Guild, I can't be very mobile because I'm playing this weird flute thing that you got to play into a microphone a certain way. So my eyes are moving around a lot. I'm stomping my feet. Conducting the band with my foot stomp is an interesting chore. But I made note of where you guys were in the crowd before we started playing that. And like the moment we started playing that song and the dance started, just seeing your guys' face light up and like getting the kids like, look, they're doing it. Oh, like that was my favorite, probably my favorite TeslaCon memory too. Absolutely. Just seeing you guys enjoy that moment.
And TeslaCon's a pretty big deal in the steampunk community.
Involved with that was really special for us because we're totally new to anything steampunk, and you were nice enough, really, and we thank you to introducing us to that community, those people. We wouldn't have been at that event without you, definitely. So it was a really interesting experience to be there and to spend the whole day. And I mean, it goes over the course of, 4 days? I think it's 4 days.
Yeah, it's a Thursday through Sunday event. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like transporting you into a whole nother world for 4 different days.
Right.
I'd never been at something like that before, so it was quite interesting.
It's similar, in my limited knowledge of this, it's similar to like a Comic-Con that goes on, and these people are all steampunk enthusiasts. So, I mean, the amount of time that they put into their personas and their costumes, a lot of these people travel from great distances. They'll come and spend the week, and really nice people. We had a really great experience last year.
Now, was steampunk something that you were a part of before you joined TeslaCon? Was that always something you enjoyed, or was that just a new thing for you too?
So back in my parents still don't have a computer at their home to this day, right? So like, I mean, I think my like dad has a laptop or something now, but like, I didn't have the internet growing up when I was a kid like a lot of people do. And I got really involved in like my own imagination and like writing music and stuff. But when I was at school, I would take, my study hours and stuff like that and go into the computer lab and just, it was Yahoo back then. There was no Google or Bing or anything like that, just searching, looking up pictures of Kurt Cobain and Mike Patton and like printing them out and, hanging them on my bedroom wall. one day I came across steampunk, and I was, just like, but back then it was like the term had been coined and everything, and steampunk was a thing, but it was more like this cyberpunk thing.
Yeah.
Back then, and like I'm older than a lot of people think, so this is still the 90s, mind you, when this was all happening. And there's this cyberpunk movement, but I was also I really loved like, Nine Inch Nails and Devo and like all the like weird new wave and post-punk industrial stuff. Like I was really into that kind of stuff too. So like it just kind of naturally fell into like this cyberpunk and steampunk thing just kind of worked with what my interests already were. And so I was pretty fascinated by it. And I always loved like the classic horror movies when I was a kid, the Universal monsters and stuff, Dracula and Frankenstein and all that stuff. It just kind of fit right in that world too. So it was like this weird conglomeration of a lot of my interests. And so, and then, I had formed this group, Richard Cranium, right around that time. And I started incorporating more like electronic sounds and like Foley sounds into my songwriting. My very, I'm a teenager, so very experimental songwriting, we'll put it that way. And so I had started kind of experimenting with like steampunk and cyberpunk ideals for a long time. I had, these drum machines and stuff like that I would play with and write music with. So I knew about it. I was interested in it, but did I spend, $10,000 on this crazy costume and travel all over the country? No, well, I guess you can take that back. When I was like playing with my band, I was always wearing some kind of weird costume, but I wouldn't necessarily call it steampunk.
It's part of the job, right?
Right. I mean, there was definitely steampunk elements. We did the top hat thing and stuff like that for a long time, and I always had the big handlebar mustache and stuff because I was the ringleader of this crazy, goofy circus punk band,
Yep.
So yeah, but then, and I also did a lot of performing with like Old World Wisconsin and the Renaissance fairs and stuff like that. So it kind of just all conglomerated at the right time, I guess.
Cool. Absolutely. That's really cool. Well, we really appreciate you kind of introducing us to that world. It was
for sure.
Definitely memorable to be a part
of.
It was a good primer to steampunk. I definitely
absolutely.
And like you mentioned, though, it really does encompass a lot of different genres, elements.
Well, there's like two worlds of steampunk. There's the really accepting like steampunkers who are also Rennies.
Right.
And who are also like into like a bunch of different other cosplays, like animes and Comic-Con, stuff like that. There's like that world. But then there's the purist steampunkers.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's hard to get them to play along together,
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, that's a lot of different people trying to fit in the same space.
But for some, and Eric Larson, the organizer, he just does an amazing job creating these worlds that gives people the opportunity to express their own selves. You can be whatever you want. You can be a pirate sea creature robot.
Yep.
Or you can be an aristocratic, the Monopoly man, if you want. So.
Yeah, that was one thing I really liked. We didn't really get to experience it because we ran the booth part of it, but I liked the fact that it was really all-encompassing. Like, it was immersive for the people that came. And they had events and things like that. And, I don't think you really get the idea. You understand how much work goes into that.
Especially with, an orchestra. And last year, that was the smallest group we'd ever performed with.
Really?
Yeah. As far as TeslaCon goes. Vardo is a lot of work. And our first year, I think we had a 15-piece orchestra. And it's around that. The second year we performed there, I think we had like a 17-piece orchestra. And you can, this is so I guess another little bit of a background. Like, Richard Cranium was active for many years. Our drummer passed away in 2014, and we had disbanded. But we did recently release some of the music that we recorded with him, and it's been a bittersweet experience. But there's a lot more Richard Cranium music to be released, which some of it does have some pretty heavy steampunky elements for sure. But with that band, it was kind of anything goes, because I started it when I was a kid writing weird punk rock, and then it kind of grew into like borderlining like pop and hip hoppy kind of stuff, and then went into like this reggae funk thing, and then it went over into like weird like circus metal.
So do you think it kind of grew as you grew, as your musical talents or interest grew? Did it kind of go in those directions?
Yes, but also where I was going with this in the first place was our drummer Mark pulled me aside one day. We had just like finished recording our first record, and he's like, "Holy crap, that was amazing, but we're never going to be able to pull it off live." He said there's way too much going on here. We're going to need to tour with a 15-piece band, and we're going to break the bank, and we're not going to make any money. He said, you save this stuff for the movies, man. You should be writing music for the movies. And this is our rock band. Let's play rock band. Let's tone it down a little bit. So in a weird way, I kind of went backwards with Richard Cranium. I kind of broke it down a little bit, and that's when we started doing like the reggae, funk, jam band kind of stuff where, you could pull it off with 3 to 5 people.
Right.
Instead of having this literal orchestra playing all this crazy stuff. So after he had passed, and I formed Vardo, I was like, well, now we're going all out, man. Like, so it was even more so, I guess, developed orchestral style, and but with still like a folk bass, right? But with that whole idea is like Cranium could kind of do anything. So then, I mean, could you imagine like Vardo playing like reggae? It wouldn't work. No. Right? But that's kind of like what Cranium did. We didn't really care. We just did whatever we wanted to do. And what's cool is we could blend in with any band. So like if we got offered a show, be like, oh, let's play this set. And we'll play all these tunes. And we could make it work with a wide variety of different groups. But so when it came time with Vardo, I wanted to kind of stick with one, even though Vardo's really eclectic and versatile as well, but it still has that folk base.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like folk from all around the world. So, that first record was this Wild West cinema adventure, and the next release was the Cog song with the steampunk dance we made. And then it was, this like Eastern European circus music, and then Middle Eastern belly dance fusion. And so it's just kind of like a little bit of, it's still really variety. I get bored, so, and I'm inspired by a lot of different cultures, and I am, my family is multicultural too, so, I'm sucked into that, and I get inspired easily. So it's hard for me to kind of stick to one thing, but it still has like a root. But like I still like playing metal. No, I can't really do that with Vardo. So that's where like Toma comes in. So Toma's like the evil twin of Vardo. It's my dark side.
Well, it's good. It's good that you got an outlet for all of that.
Yeah.
I think we're finding too, as we're exploring, HyperBaby, Wheel of Cheese, and all these other sub branches of what we're doing. That's kind of becoming the route we're taking as well.
Yeah.
We have all these creative ideas and projects that we want to explore, and you need a venue to do those.
Yeah, they don't always fit in this bin, right?
It's the umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us a little bit to HyperBaby and the music that everybody heard in the intro to the show, which is that Chad made for us as well.
Yeah, he's all over the place.
Yeah, so besides like metal and folk belly dance music, I also make like music and like, shopping at Target kind of stuff.
Themes for podcasts.
Yeah. So yeah, well, why don't you guys kind of kind of touch on like what you like wanted from me? And then like we'll talk about what you ended up getting from me.
Right. I think the biggest thing was sort of this bossa nova feel.
Yep.
But there was something else about it. I can't remember.
We wanted like a casual elevator between two ferns kind of levity to our intro music, because that's kind of what we're trying to go for here. Is nothing super serious.
Right. Not too serious, not too goofy.
And yeah, Chad, this time I was pleasantly surprised. And then you just kept going and going. And I think
yeah, you definitely got a bang for your buck. That's for sure.
We got several iterations that are vastly different.
Right. I hope everyone's been paying attention that each episode has a slightly different theme.
Surprise. You can go back and listen to the intros.
Right. Exactly. Gotcha. No, but, so yeah, so I was approached about this and like, I love bossa nova music. I'm really fascinated with like video game music, and if you listen to like a lot of those early Nintendo songs, they're like these like bossa novas and like fun little retro tunes.
Yeah.
So you told me like, hey, we're looking for this kind of thing. So I'm like, all right. And I was in the middle of a bunch of projects per usual, especially during these times. Like, a lot of people think like I'm bored, but I'm far from it. I'm definitely keeping really busy during this time. And so I ended up writing this bossa nova that just ended up really fun and a little darker than I even wanted to show you. But it ended up being I ended up actually releasing it as like this bonus track on an album called Saturday Morning Bumpers. I think that came out. It was sometime last month or something. But or the month before maybe. But so like, that's where my mind went. And I kept hounding you guys like, well, what's the title of the podcast going to be?
I remember that.
Because how my brain works. Like, what are the guilds like? Like I'm like, give me something.
No.
Give me something because I'm making this crazy Hanna-Barbera stuff over here.
Like, you want the backstory. You want all that.
Yeah, I was like,
so if
I want it to work.
If you hire Chad, be ready to go because he will go.
Yeah.
We weren't quite ready.
Yeah, so like I wanted to get something and make the theme like work with, okay, number one, what the podcast is about, and number two, like the theme and title of the podcast, and not just for like the name of the song, but that's a big part too, the title of the song,
right? And
like where the direction is going to go and how it's going to work out. So when you guys settled on, you're like, we're going with HyperBaby Podcast. And I said, brilliant. I know why. I know exactly why. And like, I've been writing a lot of like playful tunes, and I'm like, let me do it with toys. Let me do it with like toys. And you're like, oh, we're kind of going for this bossa nova thing. And I'm like, trust me, man. I was like, it'll still be in that world. And if you actually listen to the rhythm, to the actual like percussion of like the main theme, right? It's a bossa nova theme. It really is. It still has that root. But I also kind of like been doing a lot of this like retro housewife music kind of thing. And like music and like stuff you'd hear at Kmart back in the,
oh man, Blue Light
like
Special.
the 50s. Exactly, the Blue Light Special. So, okay, let's do this style of music, but do it with like toys and baby toys and stuff, HyperBaby, and have it be a little upbeat, but keep it in that world of the elevator music. So that's kind of how it came to be. It's like toy pianos and music boxes and a bunch of just like fun stuff. Like the rattle that you hear, that's actually like a real baby rattle that my son played with when he was a little baby. And
yeah. I like the authenticity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's it gives it depth again. You're going back.
Exactly.
It's giving it depth.
Yeah.
I like that. And
it's fun. It was good.
There's tons of different variations.
Yeah, so like then I'm like, okay, well, what? And then so I sent you a quick demo, right? Just like messing around on Messenger. I just like recorded a little part and I sent you. I'm like, well, here's like the basic idea, and you're like, yeah, great, cool. So like, okay, in my brain that says, okay, dude, that's green for go. Develop this song and go for it. So I create the theme, and I think it was the one that played week 2. It's the right the waiting game, like music bumper or whatever it's called, right? So that was like, I'm like, okay, here you go. And then you're like, well, we really like just the ukulele, and it's this little toy ukulele that like it's hard to keep in tune, and it's this janky thing. And I'm like, well, I was like, well, that's cool, let me like record it with a real ukulele. And then like I listened back to it and I'm like, the jankiness of this thing makes it cool. Like if it was just like straight up song, it wouldn't be the same, you know? So like I was like, well, we'll just keep it with the toy ukulele. So I ended up like sending you the solo ukulele version. And then like as I'm like mixing, you know, I'm checking levels, I'm doing all this stuff, and it's like I bring up just the ukulele and the toy piano, and I'm like, well, that's kind of cool by itself too. And I'm like, all right, well, what if I add like the music box? Like, oh man, now that's really cool by itself too. And it's like just this little, all these different variations, like where you could take this song. And like the whole idea of variations, you know, comes from like the Mozart, like the variations on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And that's where that idea came from. You know, this Twinkle Twinkle Little Star nursery rhyme variations. And I'm like, well, we could run with that idea too. These variations off of this song. So yeah, I came up with, I think, a total of like 6 or 7 variations. We're four deep in now.
Yep.
Right.
This is episode 4.
Yeah.
So you know, and so last week was the nursery mix, right? So that's the toy ukulele.
Next week is the Angels of Death mix.
Yes, exactly. The toy piano and the music box. So it's like this nursery little world, and you can just immerse yourself in that moment, and just imagine yourself chasing your kid, cleaning up his toys, her toys, whomever. You know, you guys gotta. You know, Chris is stuck over there with all these girls.
Oh, and by stuck you mean blessed.
Yes, exactly. And over here, you know,
correctly.
And well, no, I'm saying it from the other end. Like we've outnumbered my wife, son, and I. So I feel bad for her too. You know. So
hey, you know what?
Batman all the time over here. You know.
There's an added benefit to having like these nice little lullaby cutesy intros and outros to our podcast, because people can listen to them and then go right to sleep. Like,
yes, exactly.
Right, like us tonight, we can just go right to sleep.
Right.
Chad, lovely tunes.
I like how each variation is just different enough to make it a unique song.
Yes.
But there's really great common thread. You can tell they're all related. It's just like looking at the same world through different colored glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that whole idea of variations. It's like, what can you do with this same thing to make it unique? You know, so I guess that's the whole idea. And it's a great experience for the listener, and it's also a great experience for us too, because we get to keep it fresh.
Absolutely, man. Well, I think we're out of questions. I think we covered everything in the wrong order, but we covered it.
Sure, yeah.
Which is A-okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Chad? Any projects, any shout-outs, anything you got on your radar?
Let's see. So I guess next month I got a bunch of stuff coming out. I've got, the 2-year anniversary of Vardo, the debut release just came out. So that's a kind of a big milestone, and we've got some fun little things to share.
Absolutely.
There'll be a lot more Vardo music coming this year. And a couple weeks from now, I've got another single coming out that I can't talk about yet. But so you're just gonna have to wait for it to drop, and it's gonna be really fun, and it's gonna be something interactive to get us through all this craziness together. And then the ExpectoCon 2 soundtrack comes out next month, which that's a trip in itself. Like creating ambient music for hallways of a convention, like
Yeah.
creating this world with music is really fun. So I'm really proud of it. And I got to admit, like, this whole experience, like, I just hope everyone realizes how important the arts really are, because playing these games and listening to these bands and discovering new bands and watching movies and binging TV shows and playing video games and reading books and reading comic books is what's keeping us all sane through this. And I hope that people understand that, the arts are just as important as any other education. And that.
One thing that I want to speak to that point on is one of the things that I've really felt blessed with working with you and some other people is that when you get to see somebody as close as I get to see you working with your craft, you start to really realize how important it is to that person. Like, not only just are they doing what they love, but you, as a supporter of them, are helping them support their dreams. Like, and that's a big thing that I think in our world today we get disconnected from, and we just consume. Like you just said, I want to watch this movie, I want to do this. We forget that there's a human element and a stack of people usually behind the things that we consume. And it's really important to start at your center and work out. That's why we want to support you as an artist and the people we work directly with. That's why it's super important. The guy down the street, he might be struggling nowadays because he can't do his normal gig. Figure out a way, if you can do it as a supporter, buy a CD or do whatever it is you need to do to support him in this trying time. Like, that's super important.
And I'm fortunate enough to have outlets to bring income in to my family. This is what I do for a living. And working with people like you guys is literally feeding my family right now. And doing the movie things and the convention things, and I have a lot of music out there, so I do pretty well with album sales and things like that. But there's a lot of musicians right now that are really in trouble.
Yeah.
The working musician who's counting on playing those weekend shows to feed his family or her family or himself or herself. And that's what's going to be tough. Like, this is going to forever change the world. It could bring a lot of people down into not wanting to write music now.
Yep.
So supporting these musicians is especially really important right now. So when you're seeing people doing these live streams on YouTube and Facebook and all this stuff, just remember that, this world already started changing with music file sharing and things like that. And this is a really hard hit for those folks. So, but kind of the point I was getting to at first was, for me, I'm being really productive, and it's for a lot of stuff that is like for a pre-order or something that's coming out like a next month or the month after that. And normally I get to either like perform this music live, or it's like, done and then released, and I get like a response from my fan base and stuff. But I'm like working on all this stuff that I can't show anybody. And I don't know if it's the isolation or what it is, but I feel like I'm like missing something.
Sure.
There's no like instant gratification. There's no dopamine rush. It's weird feeling.
Yeah, you're creating in a vacuum where you can't.
Yeah, it's really weird. And it's like, yeah, I've been really productive. I've created all this awesome stuff, but I can't show anybody. It's weird. So anyway, it's still fun. Absolutely. And it's rewarding, so.
Absolutely. And we're happy to have you making stuff for us.
Yep.
We're definitely going to
exactly.
keep on going.
Been a lot of fun.
You guys get the overload.
Yeah.
You get to fill our ears with pleasant tunes. We can listen all day.
Well, I'm always down to work with you guys, and it's always fun catching up.
Same here, man.
When all this passes, you got to bring that beautiful little family down here, and we'll have a jolly time.
We're ready to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, we're itching. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So.
I mean.
All right. Well, may all your dreams be towers.